Welcome to Living with Intuition Coffee Chats, your source of real perspectives, insight, and humor from down-to-earth, kick-ass intuitives. Join Lindsay from Super Secret Powers and Andrea from A Soul's Journey with Andrea as we delve into today's coffee chat. Let me flip over and find my live stream. Just looking for my live stream. It is just me today, so if you are watching this on Andrea's profile, you are going to want to flip over to Lindsay Baldessano, or Lindsay Peters Baldessano it is. And so if you want to watch content, or if you want to comment along with me, go right ahead and just flip over to my file so I can actually watch you. So I can actually see your comments. There we go. I have my comments up. Woohoo. Alrighty. So today we are just with me because Andrea is feeling a little under the cosmic weather. Nothing actually wrong, just, feeling that out of sortsness of all the things happening this week, because it is a very busy week, astrologically speaking, and it takes a little while to get through and to find your own pace and to find what's coming forward that's just going to move you forward. Yeah, I don't know. I've just been working my plan this week. I did have trouble sleeping last night, but I don't know. Just me. But today we are talking about claiming your intuition, and this is the Living with Intuition coffee chat. I have my coffee because it's always coffee, because I love coffee. What do you have today? And feel free to, chat in the comments back and forth as this, brings stuff up for you. I mean, I have to say that I was one of those, like, if you're talking about like archetypes in a way, like I was like this like magical child. That is kind of where I started. I always wanted to be intuitive. I never thought I actually was, crazy enough. But I started out probably around 11 with a crystal book. And learning to program crystals, because I always thought it was something like I had to get away with, right? I always thought it was something that like it was some big secret about me that I was into this stuff. And I always, because I always wanted to be it. I wasn't in that space where it was just like, this is just who I am, not the desire to be, but the, you know what? Like this stuff is just so deeply entrenched. This is the way I think about the world. This is, the way I authentically feel. So why am I having this issue of feeling, I guess you can say imposter syndrome, but also that, just that people would judge me really for having alternative beliefs and all that. Afraid of the whole label of of woo long before that was ever a thing. Back then the label was new age, like, oh, you're one of those new age people. It had that same connotation back then. You're all new agey. But yes, I'm probably older than you think I am. I don't know. That it really carried on well into my 20s and in my 30s, where it was then, by the time I started really like easing just into who I was in general, not my intuitive self, not this is my claimed soul purpose kind of stuff. Um, of course, I was, still actively working it and actively practically working it, but only in a certain context and only with certain people and only, like we already had to have that connection before I would even like go there with you. I was very closed off about who I was, even if I wasn't closed off in my, visual identity expression of it. And I always see it, at least for myself. I don't know about you guys, like the purple hair and the witchy clothes and all that. Um, that is so very just tied to not just my identity, but just how I experience myself. So for me, that is an important part of my own claiming. Oh, we're getting a storm here. But I mean, I've gone through periods where I'm just, my regular brown hair, and I'm probably just going to leave it like this for a while, where it's, my natural color on top and even some gray. I doubt you can see it, but whatever. It's whatever. Because it was always not just about me coming into like, oh, wearing that witchy label. It was just always that expression of how I felt inside. Um, and I've always been the person who wanted, crazy dyed hair, and I wanted to be intuitive, and I wanted all of these things for myself, for my own experience of my own life, and then the quality of choices I would make, and all that kind of thing. Um, but for the longest time, I didn't like own it. I only owned it on that kind of very superficial level of it's not even the aesthetic, because for me it went deeper than the aesthetic. It was just like, no, this is just who I am and how I want to show up and how I want to engage with the world. um but all of this stuff really like started coming to a head when I was going through this whole horrible custody battle, right? um because I was afraid. I was so deeply afraid in my 30s at, of going in front of like all of these very official people and being persecuted, and of being seen for who I was, and having to tell the judge like, yes, I'm a witch. And it is something that my ex brought up as if it were a thing that in this day and age, I mean, I understand now in 2024, because this is like 15 years ago, that it's trying to become a thing in certain states, in certain places still. Um, but he actually did bring it up in front of the judge. Like, I shouldn't have my child because I was a witch. And fortunately enough, I was with the judge, who was just like, you can't bring that stuff up here. This is like, that's not a thing. Like, like you can't say those things. You can't say those things and expect like I'm going to take you seriously. Um, but she was a crazy judge anyway. But she at least stood for me on that. That was before I yelled at her and got myself in contempt of court. But so, I mean, I didn't, well, I was claiming like the word witch. Even by that point, I wasn't like living out. I was, but I wasn't. Oh, see, that's the thing. And when you think you are, you think you're in this claiming, like you're really like maybe even like reclaiming the whole like history of witch and the persecution and the like. Even if you go down that route, you still have to go through this process of actually claiming the fact that you are, a divine soul, that you are part of divinity and divinity is part of you. You are part of the weird and the web and the weft of this plane, and in addition, other planes of existence, other dimensions, other, soul collectives, all this, that, and the other thing. Depends on what your unique connection is like, how that comes through. I'm just speaking, of course, from my own experience. Uh, and Will says, yeah, I've been there, I've studied, I've claimed the title, but I don't really live it. And some of it is imposter syndrome, and some of it is really, not knowing practically how to live from that soul space, because we haven't been there, because it's not part of our taught and learned experience in this society. To live as a soul rather than to live as a being with titles and labels and, like, what do you do for a living? Like, all that kind of stuff. Because you can't, like, you could just go around saying, like, oh, I'm a divine soul. That doesn't mean anybody will understand what you're saying, though. I had this talk with some Baptist ladies who came to my door the other day, and they're like, well, are you sure you're going to heaven? And I was being kind, and I was being, just very centered in myself kind of that day. And I was just like, yeah. And they're like, how? Like, how do you know this? I'm like, because I feel it. Because I feel the resonance. I feel the presence of that heavenly sphere within me. And they looked at me like I had 15 heads. And it was just like blink, blink, blink. Like, we have no context for any of that. And it was part of my point, though. It was just, giving giving them a very different perspective on, like, how do you know? Well, like, how do you know? Because it's part of your knowing. But sorry, I'm not even sure what made me think of that, but it was just like that deep identity, though, of knowing what you know, and possessing, in a sense, what you know. And I'll say using, but I don't necessarily mean like manipulating using. I just mean like knowing that these are tools, and that this is wisdom, and that this is a part of yourself that is meant to have expression in the world. Even if we don't get caught up in the whole label stuff, I still find that, even the deepest meditations and the things that, like, they say, like, oh, don't, how guides say, like, don't share this and don't share that. It still gets expressed, even if I'm not saying, like, oh, well, my guides said, because it's expressed in the way I live my life. It's expressed in the way I treat others. It's expressed in all of these different ways. But it took me reaching the point of, that ego death kind of in my 30s, when I was going through the custody battle, and, that I really well, a teacher walked into my life, and it was just like, in the context of business, like, do you want to, really shine online? Of course. You're like, of course. I want to attract followers, like, logical thing here. But it ended up being so much more, because she was really teaching this whole soul embodiment and these presence practices, and really allowing a bigger sense of myself to live within my body, and to really start to guide my whole process, from intuition, from how I was pinging back and forth with the universe, to being this, I don't know, the connection just felt so much deeper. Like, it wasn't just like me up in my head doing these things. Because that's where my tech stuff comes from. I'm like, oh, I said things, and they, I say pictures, and I say things, and I'm going to make them appear on websites and sales pages, and but the connection just became so much more a part of like me, of my field, of deep down into the lower chakras where we don't live from a lot of the time. We tend to live like up here. There are some people who are very grounded by nature, but and the way they connect naturally is different than when you're connecting naturally from up here. It's just like a perception shift you have to make, and you have to make it for yourself. Um, but I'm kind of rambling through this because I didn't really have this plan, because Andrea wasn't going to be here at the last minute and all that. But once I got into the presence practices and I started really building up that sense of presence and observer, and they even did like different levels of observer within myself, it was then really just just a matter of consciously choosing how I wanted to live on my terms, on my own terms, what felt aligned, and bringing that stuff forward wasn't like this hard thing, and I have to plan the projects, and like it took me so much out of my head and out of all those crazy little intrusive thoughts that it's not even funny. It was like I had a personality change in a sense. But really it was just always that calm me that was coming forward, that me who is a little bit more grounded and isn't all up in the fairy, and uh because I have a lot of friends that are context more like Andrea. I've always been, just that kind of grounded person who'd rather wear jeans and a t-shirt than anything else. Um, but so like disclaiming had nothing to do with labels. It had nothing to do with necessarily things I read in books about what it meant to be a witch or what it meant to be an intuitive. It was then this process of just allowing those connections that have like always been a part of me or have always resonated with my soul forward, to be more present in the moment with me. And that's how I started channeling, and that's how I started really seeing just leaps and bounds in my own intuitive result. It was because I built this strong foundation of my actual presence, my actual authentic energy, my actual authentic intuitive process, really knowing where my connections were coming from, and what's quality versus not quality, what's am I a little bit more in mind today than in my deep wisdom, and making the shifts on a moment to moment basis to just keep coming back and saying like, all right, why did that get me all up in my mind? Because mind isn't going to have the whole solution. Mind can figure some shit out. Mind can, help me put the actual tasks in Asana when I need to have some kind of tracking, but it's not going to give me the clarity that soul presence and soul identity gives me. And when I start pulling from soul more and really leaning into that foundation of my own presence and my own authentic energy, I'm able to bring mind and emotion and all the wiggly niggly things about just the body energy back into a much stronger alignment and presence, and we're all working together as a cohesive being, and it feels like I'm working as a cohesive being. So when we're talking about like claiming this thing that has no name and is referred to as like just the observer, I mean, but we're really talking about is like your living experience, how you experience self and how you experience the greater parts of yourself where your wisdom actually is. Because wisdom is non local, it's not in your body, it's not just in your brain, it's not just in your chemical reactions, it's happening when you're processing thoughts and all that. That's part of it. That is part of it because it's meant to be this whole holistic, energetic, holistic system. You know, the skin, neurons, the everything. The fields out here, your connections, it's all working together. It's all in a meshed system. And just bringing ourselves an awareness that we're not just like, I'm trying to read your mind into this. I am a soul, and I am a soul connected with others, and I am a soul connected with the infinite, and I am a soul connected with source. That is the strong foundation you need in order to really begin developing yourself, but your intuition and your own powers of manifestation, if you want to put it that way. But that is the it thing that you feel like you're missing. And it's not just in the purple hair. I mean, I love my purple hair. That's just it. I'm not doing it because I look cool. Well, I mean, I am, because I want to look cool, because it feels like me, because it's one of those things, and I call them rights of being, that really help me like get to that point where I am building up that soul presence, because I love how it feels, because I love how I feel, because I love being in that moment with that feeling. Because and it snowballs and it bubbles up and it comes forward, and then everything comes right back into alignment. So it's one thing to claim the label, and it's one thing to really claim the fact that it's a real, that this is a real thing, that I walked into that. I walked into my grandmother's house, and I somehow perceived her imprint from 20 years ago, and I felt a connection with it. Those are necessary steps, and I try and really like put that into my content. Those are kind of necessary steps to come into that awareness and that awakening to it. But then to know that you are this being who is connecting with the energy imprint of another being, and that you are present in that space together, perhaps having an experience together, because imprints, they're not really conscious. I mean, that's a whole other level of just having this amazing self-trust and confidence. And it just takes that imposter syndrome just out of the picture, because it's not a real thing anymore. I know this is happening because I trust myself. I trust my own perceptions. I trust all of this energy around me, within me, that I've built up and that I've cultivated over years at this point for me. And there is no other reality. This is my reality. And Will says, when you realize and really give into the fact that everything and everyone is connected, it changes your life. It does. And not really even in this mental way of changing your life. Like, oh, I can push myself to feeling empathy towards somebody because I know in some way they're kind of reflecting the problem back to me. I mean, I like that, I understand that level of work. I like that level of work. But for me, it becomes much more simple because I'm experiencing the connection. And so I prioritize my experience of the connection to the other person, to the imprint, to the crystal, to whatever. So it's just like I'm always having this like private conversation, not necessarily like speaking in my head, but feeling, and I'm pinging back and forth with feeling because that's where my experience is. And like it's just so it's just so much more me, because me is out here. Me is, I can't even do it with hands. Me. um and that's, it's just amazing because it just, yes, it shifts your mind, but those things that brought forward all of those doubts, all those intrusive thoughts, all of those doubts, all of those, but I can't tell my dad this. um, it it shifts the whole conversation because you see how those things aren't real, because you are seeing that even if you don't choose to say, like, talk about it in a very physical and tangible way, that they are also kind of having an experience by being part of your greater energy always. And those are those ripples that we talk about, when we choose something, when we claim something within ourselves. This is who I am, this is what I am. Those ripples go outward and find expression in some way, shape, or form anyway. Or that's how our light changes everything. It's the whole butterfly effect, it's all that kind of stuff. But it doesn't always come down to, necessarily what we do and all of our little doings, or exactly how we phrase it. You really kind of can then begin to encompass this whole idea of communicating ideas and communicating your own identity and your own sense of compassion and empathy just through existing. And that whole, I don't have to do anything. Okay, we live in a physical world, but on one level, we aren't really doing anything but being ourselves in order to create this change. And then what flows forward action-wise into this world is just the natural extension of our own alignment, of our own energy, of our own beliefs, of our own love. All right. So I have gone on about this. Just checking for more comments. All right. I am getting very hungry, so I need to go feed myself. But I do want to invite people to there it is, my Awaken Your Intuition mini course. It is at a special price for a short amount of time. It's only $44 to get in on this whole idea of laying this foundation for your intuitive, your soul development, your confidence development, of having this one piece that's really going to help you build that strong foundation and really begin to build up that soul presence and that energy and really bridge that gap. So you're not feeling imposter syndrome. So you're not feeling the doubt. So you're coming at this just from your own personal experience of love and of loving the choices that you want to make and of loving you just being you, because we all deserve that. We all need that. All right. So I think you could just click on it, but I'll put the link below in the comments anyway. Grabbing the linky link. There we go. There's that. And I will see you on Sunday, Monday for the intuitive, or not, yeah, for the Magic Bringers Rising Energy Report. On Friday, I will be going out with Andrea for her coffee date with Andrea. So you'll see me there, even if you won't see me necessarily live. We'll see. We'll see how I feel. I have to go run a whole bunch of errands tomorrow, like going to talk to the banks and, doing all the adult and real world stuff. But of course, I'm going to do it from my soul presence and from my confidence that, I can handle this and I can ask the questions I need to ask. And I am just going to go forward with that. And I hope you do too, and that you have a magical evening. Me and Xander say goodnight.